Okay, Mr. Clerk, Madam Clerk, excuse me. So we're 10 minutes behind, I apologize. Tuesday night, 5:30, May 30th. Madam Clerk, could you please, this is a joint subcommittee between the Finance Subcommittee and the City Council, School Committee and City Council Finance Subcommittee. Madam Clerk, could you call the roll?
Chairperson Gignac?
Here.
Ms. Doherty? Mr. Gendron?
Here.
Chairperson Elliott?
Here.
Councilor Leary?
Here.
Councilor Milanazzo?
Here.
5 present.
5 present, so I'm not sure how we want to handle this. This was something that was discussed and requested by the superintendent of school during the presentation of the budget. So both myself and the chair of the Finance Subcommittee communicated. Both notices were posted by the city and the school, so it's a joint subcommittee. If there's no objection from members of the school committee and members of the committee, why don't we just go right to you, Mr. Manager, or the CFO, and then we'll go to the superintendent, and then we'll go to the committee, and we'll see where we go from there, bearing in mind we probably need to schedule a little bit more time for this, but we'll see how it goes, what the recommendations are, and go. And of course, the issue is the net school spending and how it's calculated. So, Mr. Manager, there is a memorandum in place for quite some time. So perhaps we can start with that explanation to the members here. I want to recognize City Councilor Rita Mercia, as well as Mr. Hoyer in the audience. And Now that we have disposed of the formalities, we'll go, why don't we start with the MOU, and then we'll get into a dialogue with the superintendent and members of the school committee relative to the issues. Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And basically, there are two ways to approach net school spending in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. First is to have a memorandum of agreement like we now have in order. And what that is that you negotiate the different calculations between the two parties and then agree to that memorandum. However, DESE also has a form that they recommend to municipalities to use if they so desire. And it doesn't go into the detail that we go into as far as snow plowing, administrative, all that stuff. What it is, it's a per pupil cost. And so there are two ways of doing this. And we're willing to open up negotiations with the school department. I know that my financial team has already met, I believe, once with Mr. Frisch. And we'll continue to work with Mr. Frisch and discuss the different concerns and arrive at a mutually agreeable memorandum of agreement. But I think I'd like to turn it over, if you don't mind, to Connor Baldwin, who has the better idea of the financial aspects of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that's a good introduction for those, and again, for the public at home as well, what we're discussing and why we're doing it. This is something that net school spending are costs that are incurred by the city that are considered eligible cost for spending when it comes to the school department. So with that, Mr. Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Manager. Just by way of introduction and explaining the agreement, the net school spending agreement is a memorandum of understanding that was signed between the school department and the city administration back in 2007, December 19th, 2007. And as the manager just alluded to, it lays out all of those charges for services that are allocated, the maintenance of effort, commonly known, to the school department. And I'll turn it over to the deputy CFO in a moment, who deals a little bit more intimately with these, but they do run the gamut from such things as administrative services, so that the city runs the payroll, which includes the school department, runs the network infrastructure for IT. Some of the HR benefits are administered through the city department, so a portion of the cost for running those departments are allocated to the school in this agreement. And those services are calculated each year. A report is provided to the school department from the city administration, which lays forth all of those charges, along with the reports from our internal auditing software provided to the school department, which is then submitted to DESE, and then audited after that as well. So that's just a general overview of how we get the number, and for the folks watching at home and for any of the people in the audience, that's what the number we talk about when we're talking about maintenance of effort or net school spending. And when you take the maintenance of effort and you add it to the contribution to the school system from Chapter 70, the state funding, as well as the city's local cash, that's how you get the net school spending requirement number. So I'd like to turn it over to the Deputy CFO, Rodney Conley, who can talk a little bit more about the numbers.
Mr. Conley.
Thank you. Through you, Chairman. So as Connor mentioned, the net school spending calculation is a combination of sort of indirect costs the city incurs on behalf of the school department, in addition to the Chapter 70 funding and cash contribution minus transportation and adult education. In front of you, we handed out the FY16 net school spending breakdown. I'll go through it a little bit in detail. FY16 was last year that was certified. We're in FY17 now, so all those numbers are still projected until we do the end of the year report. As you can see, percentage-wise, the biggest cost is the net charter cost. So charter school expenses count towards net school spending. So where you see the net charter cost, which in FY16 made up 41% of the $38.6 million in indirect costs, that is the assessment dictated by the state minus the reimbursement received by the city. So that was $15.8 million in FY16. Another high number, I guess percentage-wise, 15% would be the pension cost for retired school department employees. These are non-teachers. Similarly, the retiree insurance, health insurance for school department employees. Getting to the maintenance, 4.1 million in FY16. That makes up 11% of that 38 million. Again, 3.3 million of that is utility costs. That's energy, electricity and gas. One of the benefits we've had over the past 3 years is we brought on an energy manager through a state grant who's been able to curb energy costs, as well as identify anomalies in billing to save the city significant sums of money, both on the city side and the school side. So that's worth pointing out. In fact, we were just awarded a grant from the governor's office, a CIC grant to institute a software program to help us monitor even further. So those are, and again, the administrative costs, which Connor touched on as well. So those are some of the big costs relative to net school spending, and if there are any questions relative to that.
Okay, so at this point, can we just recap for all of us here? So the agreement that's in place allows these costs, these administrative costs, and the other costs that you have gone through, which at this point totals, the net school spending is 38.6 million, correct?
Correct, but as of FY16, end of year. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Anything else at this point? Do we want to go to the superintendent, or members have questions? I had questions.
Yes, if
Councilman
I could, Mr. Chairman, how does the, if I could probably to Mr. Baldwin or Mr. Conley, the circuit breaker account affect the net school spending, if it has any relationship at all? I know that I think that the circuit breaker account had a balance of $2.3 million. Again, this is off the top of my head after having gone through this, and I just didn't know how that related back to how we calculate net school spending, if it's related at all, and I apologize if it's not.
It's not a calculation that we do on our end. I would defer to Mr. Frisch on the school side.
Okay.
So just for our viewers at home, can we discuss the circuit breaker program?
I apologize. I should have directed.
Well, Councilman Lazo, if you want to.
Yeah, that's okay.
Sure. The circuit breaker program is a revolving account. Last year, we had 2.9 million in the circuit breaker. The cap, the allowable cap, you can only accrue 1 year.
Okay.
And so the cap was, like you said,
2.3
2.3 million. There's the expense side on the local funds, which gets counted for the net school spending. What's in the revolving account is sort of a carryover fund that gets counted only when you spend it.
Only when you spend it.
Right.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Mr. Chair of the school committee? Mr. Gendron? Okay. We all set on the city side? Mr. Superintendent?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Right. Well, one of the things that my interest lies into going over this memorandum of understanding, memorandum of agreement. The last time this was done was 10 years ago, roughly, and it tried to look at it and try to revise it, refresh it, and also have it approved by DESI. So that was the first exercise we're trying to do. In terms of the numbers, I'm not going to want to get too much into detail in here, but obviously we have different numbers, and I would like you to sit down and maybe the two CFOs can go over the two tables that we have, because our table shows about $2 million difference. I'm sure there's an explanation, about $1.5 million difference.
So do you have copies for the members of the subcommittee?
Yes,
Are
I
they on
distributed
here?
those at the table.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I would recommend that the two CFOs might want to sit down and consolidate their tables and see which one we have wrong, or and make sure that we have the same numbers.
Get this one a bit.
Here you go.
I was just,
Yeah, at this point, let me just turn it over to our CFO, and we'll go forward.
the difference of opinion, or the difference in the numbers, one of the differences was on the charter school expenditure, so we can easily determine that. But briefly, I'd like to review the kinds of questions that we have towards the memorandum of agreement. I have listed several questions. For instance, are the indirect administrative charges that Connor and Rodney spoke of, are the charges appropriately allocated to the school committee? Is it the right percentage? Is it too high, too low? So we want to delve into that. The next question is, should some of the charges paid by the city be directly paid by the school department? And vice versa, should some of the charges paid by the school department be actually paid by the city? For instance, transportation comes to mind. So that currently is a cost that is paid by the city. And should that be paid by the school department? Should that be paid by the city? Another question we have is, by what amount should school expenditures exceed net school spending requirements? On average, throughout the Commonwealth, net school spending on average is 20% higher than the minimum requirements. So we want to look at what is the appropriate amount that exceeds that requirement. In addition, how often should the memorandum of agreement be reviewed? It's been 10 years. Should we every several years review it? And then a side issue is, what system is in place to plan for building needs in the future? So that's not addressed by net school spending, but we want to look towards the future and be able to solve some of our problems, some of the enrollment issues that cannot be solved in one year.
Well, that's not going to be part of the net school spending discussion. That's an ancillary issue, which
Yes.
I completely understand, but we're here for net school spending.
Right.
So can I just, anything else, Mr.?
Yeah, I just want to point out that the maintenance of effort agreement that we have here covers more than just the net school spending. So that's why we look at it as more a discussion around the maintenance agreement, of effort agreement, than just the net school spending. As you can see in the net school spending, in the agreement itself, it clarifies which charges are part of the net school spendings and which are not. And
Okay, Councilman Leonardo.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is it possible for you to, I don't know if the term is drill down on that 20% higher than the minimum net school spending on average across the Commonwealth? Do you have numbers for an urban district the size of Lowell? Again, I mean, obviously Lowell's the fourth largest city in the Commonwealth, so I'm just curious as to what, Boston and maybe Worcester and Holyoke and Brockton, some of those communities, where they are on their over their net school spending, if they're
We can
active.
provide that information.
Okay, all right, thank you. Again, just be curious based upon the size of this school department budget versus others.
Well, I think that's, it's a good point. I was going to ask the same question. What communities have you looked at that have higher, that exceed greater than the 20%?
This is just an average of the entire
Across
school
the state.
districts across the
That's
state.
the average, the 20%. Okay, good, I understand. Further discussion? Mr. Baldwin?
So I think there were a number of really good questions there that we can discuss or take back and report back to the Finance Subcommittee or the Council, whichever the body would choose. I guess one of the things I'd like to touch on is what the superintendent just mentioned about when we talk about net school spending, there are some charges that are don't count towards net school spending, I suppose. And one of the major ones on the city side is debt related to construction or rehabilitation for school buildings and or departmental equipment purchases. And I have the numbers here for at least fiscal 16. So this is a cost incurred by the city that is reported but doesn't count towards net school spending. And in fiscal 16, there was $10.4 million in long-term debt retirement, and then another $870,000 approximately of interest that was paid on that. And that's One piece that, is a significant cost for the city that is not added towards the net school spending total.
So Mr. Baldwin, that's 10.4 long-term debt for schools, the schools that we have built, or other improvements, or what exactly includes in that debt?
They would all be either principal and interest payments on school construction bonds or rehabilitation of school buildings. In fiscal year 14, there was a almost $13 million capital plan that was approved by the city that portions of that have been paid down since. So it would be things of that nature, all specifically related to the school department, or school buildings,
I'm sorry,
I should
and the
say.
870, what was that for? I was reading.
That would be interest. So the $10 million number is the principal, and then $870,000 for long-term interest, and then I don't have it right here, but call it another $30,000 or so for short-term interest on bond anticipation notes.
And none of that are eligible expenses, whether we go with the DESI route or whether we go the memorandum of understanding. It's just not an eligible cost to be considered as maintenance of effort as part of the net school spending.
That's correct, and that's per the CMR, the regulations that
Right.
govern administrative cost average.
Okay. In your former life, Mr. Manager, why under ed reform was that excluded? Because the focus or the reasoning behind the ed reform was to focus on operating costs and to separate those two and to ensure that the money is going in the classroom versus just the bricks and mortar.
And, we own the schools,
Right.
so it was like you own the building, so you pay for the underlying costs of the building.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, Councilor Leary.
No, I don't, I guess the first question is, have we we should be looking at the MOU. It is 10 years old. Have we already begun discussions on that? Have there been meetings already?
We had some informal meetings with Connor and Rodney,
Okay, good.
myself, and
All right, so I
other
think,
staff
what
member.
from my standpoint, I think the information coming to us right now is good. At least we know what your concerns are. Obviously, I was in the school department, so I understand the concerns. I think getting that number for who's above 20% is essential, because that's something that you always want to benchmark against people likes and see if we're doing better or not, where we are when we're in that analysis. And I think, though, before we come again to have a meeting, I think we should have more meetings in terms of getting this document and then having an agreement in place to see if you can work that out. And if there's an issue where you can't, then we come before us to have that dialogue. I think it's not premature to do this, but it is premature to set up another meeting until at least we have to see what you guys can hammer out. But I would be of interest to see that 20%, because I like to be likes. I don't want to be behind, in the bottom half or in the middle. I'd rather be up towards the top as a goal. Whether that's reachable or not based on the numbers, it's something that we should all understand what that is and who they are, and then try to reach that. Thank you.
So let me just, so right now we have an MOU. Has any attempt been made to determine what that number would be if we went through the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education? What that number would be? Are we, is the city benefiting from an MOU, or is it benefiting, is it better for the other option?
What DESI does is that they use a formula it's $108.96 per student. So right now.
Okay, and that's included on this report.
Yeah, so if you see right now under the MOU that we have, is the total net school spending credit is 1.398, whereas if we use the DESI formula, it would be 1.542. So using the DESI formula is much more favorable to the city than the existing MOU.
Okay. So that's why the desire is to sit down and have a discussion on the costs and the charging practice and ratio and indirect costs and things of that nature versus, there's no desire to go to the formula.
Well, it's not an issue of formula as far as I'm concerned, just like Mr. Leary pointed out now, is, and some of you did, is the issue of, like when you were comparing to the 20%, you really want to compare to to
Right.
people that are like you. Whether we use the formula or not is the issue of if we decide not to use the formula, we still want to know. If you want to use the formula, that's fine. That's the city's decision to use the formula. We'll use the formula and leave it alone. But if you decide not to use the formula, I think we still want to know what we're spending. And then the other thing that I would like to see the two teams to work on, as you said, more in details, is particularly the area that is painful to us, is the area of maintenance. If I get your attention to the maintenance, where it is we're only spending $307,000 a year for so many buildings, and that is where we're falling behind so often in maintenance. So my point is, what is really city expense and what is really school expense? Because, the law says, you're supposed to give us a building that is feasible, conducive to learning, and safe to children. That's all of them, all three are very relative terms. What does that mean? Do I give you a building that the schools have to repair for $1 million a year, or do I maintain for $1 million a year, or do I give you a school that your maintenance is just your regular cleaning and painting and so forth? So these are the things that really are important to us, is the maintenance, because we know that the city is not charging us a lot in maintenance. We know it's only 307, but then who should really pay for the maintenance? Because we know one thing we all agree on, regardless of who pays it, is we need to do some serious maintenance in these buildings. The next question that comes in the discussion of this maintenance agreement, should the maintenance required be $1 million? Who's going to be paying for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, well,
Because
look,
what does it really address?
I agree. I mean, and it does warrant a discussion, because there are some items that, when I was the mayor, I remember the school has plumbers. I mean, or had them?
Had, not
Had.
next year.
Okay, had. I mean, we all agree, look, we're trying to find some very strong balance here as we go through some very difficult fiscal times, and neglecting some of the conditions in the school is not acceptable. We understand, and it's been a recurring issue on both sides with councils and school committee people, and we've got a process in place. It's a matter of keeping up with those work orders. But so I guess moving forward, because this does warrant a longer discussion, is the desire to have the city and school officials sit and meet, and then get to a point where, recommendations can come forward to this body, or what are the, I mean, it seems like we don't want to be discussing it here, because you folks on both sides of the aisle, if you will, understand what the issues are, and if we want to renegotiate the MOU, we're not going to do it. It's going to be between the manager and the superintendent. So is that the suggestion? I'm sorry, I know that, Mr. Chair, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I think that's the route I was going to go. I think both administrations should meet and work on proposals back and forth. But I had one question before we go down that road. And in the budget process, the school department had chose to eliminate a few positions on the school department budget and hope to incorporate them into the city side. And we had asked the superintendent to provide us a response on whether or not the city would absorb those positions, and we were unable to get a response. So specifically, the school resource officers, are those going to maintain at those schools? And then the maintenance positions as well.
The positions that we were informed were eliminated,
Yeah,
we have included them in our operating budget.
great.
No decision has been made relative to the deployment of those officers, but with the pending maintenance issues that we're working on, and we have been working on very well, we will continue to talk about using the plumber.
Okay.
But we've absorbed all of those costs in our operating budget.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Anyone else over there? I'm not over there. Councilor Gendron, then, excuse me, I did that. Mr. Gendron or Ms. Doherty, whoever.
Thank you. I just wanted to follow up, and I know the language used was we eliminated those positions from our budget, but it was by no means to eliminate those positions in our schools. We need those officers in our schools. The understanding was we're just trying to clean things up a little bit, that we had a number of SROs, I think 3, was the amount that were on our side, and the other 6 were on the city side. We were just trying to get them all together on the city side. So I just want to be clear that we would like those SROs still at our schools. We do need them, but for purposes of, having a straightforward budget that made sense, that's why we moved them off of our rolls. Thank you.
Mr. General?
I just wanted to clarify a couple things. Mr. Conley, you mentioned that the maintenance of effort does not include transportation and adult ed. Is that right?
That they are not net school spending eligible costs, correct?
Okay, and do those come from the city?
They're appropriated as part of the city's appropriation each year in the budget.
Okay. Okay. Which means that those costs are included in the appropriation, therefore, it's counted as part of the city's contribution to the school department. Is that?
It is counted as part of the lump sum number we give to the school department, but it doesn't go into the end-of-year report to count towards to net school spending.
All right, thank you. And there was also, I was curious about the DESI versus the MOU. And it sounds like what you're saying is if we were to use the DESI calculation, the number would be lower, the city's requirement, or am I getting that wrong? Okay, I didn't see this here.
So if we went with the DESI, that means it would be more charge-off to net school spending.
Okay, so the contribution to the city would be higher. To the school department would be higher. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I completely agree with the sentiment that the parties need to get together here because the devil's in the details. It's less about the actual number and more about, what gets attributed to maintenance of effort, what doesn't, and how much money actually is available to the school department to use for operations. So I think I'm fully supportive of that idea. Thank you.
Any other questions? Members of the Council Milonazo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Looking at the total budget with $144 million from Chapter 70 and the direct cash infusion from the city, were we able to keep I think there were kindergarten paraprofessionals we were trying to keep in the budget, and then I know that we were talking about library aides, and were those able to be kept in the budget?
If I may, Mr. Chair, the kindergartens was an issue last year not because of the city. The city had nothing to do with it. It's because we lost the grant to pay for the kindergartners. So we managed to absorb those this year as part of our regular budget. So that was about between $500,000 to $600,000 that we absorbed. This year, the library aides were going to, if we had eliminated the positions of libraries, we would have saved us about $825 or something. And we restored those. The school committee voted to restore those, and through various, we had some extra money that is through the state that came in, and then we were still short about $257,000, and we understand from the mayor that the city would be advancing that. So the school committee has voted that as the part of the school committee budget, and including that additional request of $257.
So your $162 million number plus the 257, is that before us tonight?
No, I've offered the $250,000.
Okay.
That's what we're doing is, it was probably about 2 weeks ago that when we submitted the budget, and the superintendent talked about the fact that there was an increase in the Senate version of the budget, but that still left them short about $250,000. So the council made it quite clear to me that evening that they'd like me to see if we could come up with $250,000. And we reviewed next year's budget, and I believe that based upon our projections of revenue relative to tax title auctions and other things, I'll be able to free up $250,000. It's not in this operating budget, but you have my word that we will transfer $250,000 to the school department as soon as we are able to.
Okay, thank you. And just one final question. I apologize, I should know the answer to this, but did the school committee vote to support the home rule petition regarding the 100%? They can't do it? Oh. Do you know if the, because I mean, obviously, I guess, obviously is too strong a word, but if that should happen, the city, you would have on the city side, additional funds in the FY19 budget, if you will, to increase our net school spending or our direct cash contribution based upon that happening.
So the question is, did it go before the school committee? At this point, there was a resolution, there was a petition to send a home rule petition down to the legislature to have a bill passed, or to pass legislation to fully reimburse the charter schools' costs. And I see members shaking their heads, so they
No,
are not. So
we didn't go
perhaps
to a
that's
vote.
perhaps
Yeah.
perhaps even if it was just parliamentary, that a vote could be taken. It's already been sent down, right, Mr. Manager? So
Yes, I guess I misunderstood the question. The school committee, to file a home rule petition, there isn't a necessity for the school committee to vote on it, but it might be a good thing if they gave a resolution in support of it.
Sure, okay. Thank you.
So I'm sure a member or two will file a motion. Or
I'm sure everybody supports that.
We can agree on that. Okay, so I guess just taking it one step further, maybe playing a little bit of the devil's advocate, Mr. Manager, there's a significant shortfall with the state budget. Do you anticipate any of those funds being, that shortfall or that gap being, Chapter 70 being the target of that, or local aid, if you will?
Well, the shortfall is right now.
Right.
That's my biggest concern. But with that said, is that Chapter 70 or local aid can't be cut by 9C cuts by the governor. It has to be a vote of the legislature. And
I guess I'm taking it one step further
Yeah.
and saying, knowing there's a $500 million.
But is it going to affect it next year? Based upon my experience, the Senate version is usually the one that's accepted when it comes to local aid. I strike that to Chapter 70. So I'm confident that it will be the Senate version.
No one has a crystal ball. Who knows what
No, but
the
it's
Affordable Care Act
it's-
is going to do? I mean, if that passes, then we are in some serious trouble.
But it's like the movie Same Time Next Year, is that that always happens. And
We're going with the numbers we have, and
Yep.
so we'll be presenting a balanced budget to address with next year's money that gap to close.
That's an excellent point you're making, though, is because the budget that we're presenting to you tonight has the House version of the Chapter 70 and local aid, because that's what we were working with when we formulated this budget.
And personally, I think it's wise to do that, because there's a significant delta margin between the House and the Senate,
Right.
and it's better to use that number, and it'll be good news if the Senate version passes, and rather than going back mid-year and making cuts.
That's an excellent point.
On that point, I do want to make an observation that our budget that was voted was based on the Senate version that included 600 or 700. So I hope we are all wrong, that the Senate one prevails.
Okay. Councilor Larry.
If we can get that benchmarking, I think that's important. That's something we should be looking at. Whether we can make it reality, that's another thing altogether. The other thing, I agree with you about the maintenance. I think that's something we have to look at differently. And I'm not sure what the end game is with that, but at the end of the day, it is an expense. It's something that on the school side, it's something that needs to stop, because we are paying and incurring a lot of costs that are even larger than we could put up front. So it's something I'll definitely work with you on, and I know the administration will definitely work, but it's something we have to reinvent, because what we're doing now is, as hard as we're working, isn't effective. So I think that's something when we can put some creative minds to use and make that happen, I think it'll be a good thing all the way around. Thank you.
Anything else, members? Mr. Chair, members of the Finance Subcommittee? We good? Okay, thank you. Thank you for all attending. Thank you, Mr. Superintendent, Mr. Manager, finance teams on both sides, members of the school committee, for doing this in a timely manner. Looks like we're in pretty good shape. Motion to adjourn by Council Milanazzo, seconded by Council Leary. All those in favor signify by saying aye, and the opposed. Motion carries. This meeting stands adjourned.